Hello and welcome to Code Completion Episode 2. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code on this brand new show. My name is Dimitri Bugnol, and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined by my fellow completionist, Ben Golke.
Hi there.
But we also are joined by two more who simply couldn't make it last week, Fernando Olivares.
Hello, hello.
And Johnny Hicks.
Hey, everyone.
So first off, Johnny, can you tell us a bit about your process when it comes to finding your niche?
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to bring this topic up is I was talking to a very junior developer yesterday, and he's going through a boot camp right now, and had asked me, like, as soon as I finish the core curriculum, am I like ready to start applying for jobs? Like, do I need to wait and do like computer science principles? Kind of what should be the direction I should go in, and it's a really good question because a lot of people think, oh well, if I've got like the core concepts down, I'm ready to apply for jobs, right? Like it means I'm an iOS developer. But one thing that I think is important to think about as you're applying for jobs is what exactly do you want to be doing? I mean, being a programmer can be a lot of different things, right? Could be working on game applications. You could be working on text editor applications. You could be working on AR games. And I think until you know exactly what it is you want to be doing, I'd be a little bit wary of actually like going and applying for jobs just with sort of your fundamentals set up. And so this discussion that I had with this junior developer was more about, well, what do you want to be doing? And I related my experience. So I'm an engineer at Day One Journal. And when I was going through my boot camp and learning how to program, I knew where I wanted to work, right? I knew I wanted to work at Day One. I knew that was a potential opportunity for me. And so in my head, as far as what should I be doing now in order to work at Day One, I thought, well, maybe I should work on an application that would use similar technologies to Day One, right? So I went and I built this app. It's called Noteworthy. It was sort of a kind of a dumbed down version of Day One, but kind of like a personal timeline that allowed you to insert like photos and videos and just a small amount of text to sort of label that day. So think of an Instagram, but kind of like a private Instagram. And I did that because I knew that going into my interviews at Day One, I knew that I had something to show them. And, more importantly than like, oh, I've learned all these things, I had something to show them that were related to the technologies that they're using, right? Like being able to use photos and videos and being able to insert text and having, a swipeable table view, blah, blah, blah. And so that's what I'd recommend to everyone is decide where you want to go. Do you want to go to Nike? Do you want to be working on fitness apps? Well, then maybe you should start building some fitness apps so that you have something to show for it when you go. You can talk about how you've worked with HealthKit or how you've worked with the other APIs that are involved with, health applications. Same thing if you're looking and you really want to work somewhere that does heavy AR, build some apps that you're actually using AR so that when you go in to your interviews, you can say, hey, like, yeah, I have tons of experience with ARKit and I guess whatever other APIs would be important. I'm not really in the AR sphere very much, but that's what I would recommend to all developers that are sort of trying to choose their path is having a general knowledge is good, but figure out what you're passionate about and what you want to be doing. Pick a few companies that you want to work for, and then start building apps using the technologies that you would expect those companies to use.
I think it's interesting, right? Totally, I totally get where you're coming from, Johnny, and I think the advice you gave is super useful. I think something people forget is that when you talk about a web developer, the amount of technology that they can learn, the stacks are so immense You can be a JavaScript developer, a Node developer, a front end, a back end. There's Ruby. There's 1,000 things. And if you think about an iOS developer, there's this misconception that there's like we're a monolith because of Apple, right? You're in the Apple ecosystem, so you only do this. But it's exactly like you said. If I I have zero knowledge of AR, zero. So if I wanted to apply to AR jobs, I would be as useless as a Ruby developer applying for a JavaScript position, right? So I think you're totally right there.
And that's another thing, though, that Apple frameworks kind of provide Apple developers is they are all written in a very cognizant way, where once you do learn about one and the next and the one that follows that, the next one is not too difficult to pick up in terms of learning Apple's API and their style and how to put an app together using those. Oftentimes the frameworks will plug into each other. For example, you brought up AR, that fits right into AV Foundation and Vision, and they all kind of plug in and interact in key ways. So there's that aspect to think about. But also, like as you brought up, Johnny, being good at one particular task and oftentimes being really good at that one particular task can really set you apart no matter what your skill level is, because you can be a senior iOS developer and know absolutely nothing about key parts of very in-depth pieces of technology. So knowing a lot about that can put you and set you apart, even as a junior, from other seniors, because you happened to play around with all that, so you happen to know a lot about it. Now, of course, a senior could, quote-unquote, catch up to you, but that's less of a concern because you already got there. So you have that opportunity for that job if that's what you're gunning for.
I think people very much underestimate the sort of breadth of what's available on iOS. And Fernando, what you said about kind of people assume that iOS is a monolith, right? And therefore, you are an iOS developer, you know everything there is to know about iOS as a platform and how to use it and how to build apps for it. And really, it's more like, using JavaScript to build front-end applications versus back-end versus, it's just a language and it's just a set of tools. But as far as the things that you apply it to, right, there's essentially an infinite amount. And even if we don't consider the domain of the app that we're building, but we actually just consider the technology that you use to build it, even if that is a limiting factor, there's literally thousands and thousands of frameworks and libraries in iOS, and there's no way that any one developer could intimately know all of those different things and be sort of equally good at all of them, building apps using them. So like, for example, a couple jobs ago, I started working in the VPN space, a space that I had used VPNs before as a user, but I had no experience at all with building VPN applications on iOS. I sort of basically knew that there was support for it, but I didn't really even understand that there was a full framework and that you can use that framework to hook into your iOS app to sort of take over the internet connection of your iPhone and be able to have this VPN connection. I didn't know that was even sort of there. And I had been doing iOS for 8 years by then, and it wasn't even clear to me that was possible necessarily. Or that it was there. So I think it's very easy as a junior in particular to be overwhelmed by like, holy crap, there's so many things here. There's so many different things that I need to understand, and in order to be a good iOS developer, I need to know them all. And I think the key takeaway here is like, none of us know them all, right? Like none of us are that much of sort of an iOS polyglot, if that's even a term that I could use, in the sense that we know all the different frameworks and how they're utilized. Pick something, go with it, and then after a while, you'll probably end up getting a different job, and it may very well be touching a completely different part of the iOS ecosystem. And that's, for me, kind of the fun that I've had as being an iOS developer, is that even though I am in one sort of stack, I still have a ton of different options to play with.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting point that you bring up, that having a specialty like that is something that you do get on the job. So even if you don't have any particular specialty, once you start working somewhere, they're going to have very unique requirements that nowhere else is necessarily going to have. So you might learn about all sorts of technologies that are not iOS specific either, but you can build on them and slowly like expand the realm of knowledge that you do know and that you can be an expert in. And the best part about that is when you go to the next job that's completely different, you can go ahead and apply the lessons that you've learned from those different things in new ways that people weren't necessarily like expecting right away. So one of the big tenets of being developers, there are all sorts of patterns that you need to stick to, but kind of dipping your toes in many different specialties exposes you to as many different patterns as possible, and that's how you can really go ahead and use them in different ways to your benefit. So, Fernando, I heard you had some comments to add to our App Store discussion from last week, notably regarding the most recent news that just broke yesterday. Do you want to take it away?
And boy, do I have. The whole Epic thing. So the whole Epic thing is really, really interesting because I will be honest. I think I've told you guys before, but I joined iOS because it's magical. We've all seen it. Like these younger generations, they take it for granted. But having an iPhone in your hands and just playing around with it is just magical. So all I'm trying to say is that I drank the Kool-Aid when I joined. Like, if there is a cult, which there isn't, but if there is an Apple cult, I was a part of it from the beginning. And over the years, as an iOS developer, I've become a little bit more maybe jaded. I don't know if that's the right word, because Apple has been transforming itself from an up-and-comer who hit it out of the park with the iPod to just this gigantic, like, how can I like, they've become aggressive whereas before it was on self-defense. And I think this whole App Store thing, the antitrust hearings, the Epic battle, I think it's just really interesting from many points of view. The 30% being obnoxiously high, them creating a platform for 1 billion devices, and yet they're not a monopoly. There's a lot of angles to talk about, but I wanted to talk specifically about the fact that I wanted your take on this, but the more I think about it, the more interesting it seems to me comparing the App Store to an actual ISP, in the sense that Apple is providing a service of sending information, right, through the pipes. The App Store has become a dumb, trustworthy pipe because anyone can join and anyone can just download stuff. But then Apple gets 30% of your stuff, which, okay, that's fine. You're giving me the pipes. But then they also get interesting information about how many downloads you're getting. And they can compare across categories. And you would be naive to think they're not doing it. So what I'm worried about this whole Epic versus Apple thing is that we're going to go into the next level of Sherlocking. Whereas before it was like, oh, that's a nice app that the huge blob can absorb. But now it's just going to be absorbing bigger and bigger apps. And I think that's not good for anyone. So anyway, what's your take on that?
So I often wonder if it will end up in a situation where Apple just Sherlocks other apps that are there, because oftentimes Apple is spread so thin, they don't have extra engineers to work on any extra project, that if anything, they will just buy out a project to incorporate it into their own space. And that's what Apple has been doing. Like take Shortcuts, for instance. That was just a small team of people. Take Dark Sky. They wanted that feature, so rather than bother building it themselves, they just bought the people and brought them on board to go ahead and continue working, doing exactly what they were doing, just from within Apple. So from the point of view of like Sherlocking, I wouldn't say I'm very worried. I don't know.
Regardless, I mean, I understand your point, but isn't that like sort of like a cop-out in the sense that they bought Dark Sky, and so now they're going to have like a well, they used to have a weather Apple rate. Well, they do have a weather Apple rate, but they're going to have a huge participation in the weather API business now, right? And it's going to become first party, and the competition is not going to be fair because the now absorbed Dark Sky app will be able to do things that you as a third-party weather app will not be able to do. I think that's what I'm worried about. Not them building it from the ground up, but it's like, oh, I'm just gonna acquire it, and then this one and bigger and bigger. Like, I don't think that's good for anyone, not even Apple.
I guess I can see it from the other point of view, where now there's a potential that Apple could have a framework for weather that any developer on Apple's platforms could benefit from, and that's kind of how they will say this platform is a better platform, because you don't have to pay a third party for the weather information. Now, Dark Sky, it was using publicly available information to build up its API. They just had the know-it-all to put that together and make an API that others can consume easily, rather than getting it from like weather.com or Yahoo Weather, which is what Apple was using up until now. So all they bought really was a digestion of the already public information. It's not like they bought all the satellites that get the weather data that prevent other people from getting weather, you know? Now, that's not to say that's not the case for like maps, but they turn maps into such a wonderful framework that you can go ahead and build on top of. Now, once they stop keeping up with that and stop making available those pieces that allow you to build apps that are similar in vein to maps, that's when I would start getting worried, I would think. But Ben, what are your thoughts on this? I see you nodding a lot.
Yeah, well, as far as like weather in particular, right? I'm working on a personal app that involves a weather API. I'm using the AccuWeather API to do it. I was maybe going to use Dark Sky, but then they got acquired. So I do actually have an API key, but it's only going to be around for, I think it goes dark, no pun intended, next year sometime. So I didn't want to sort of sign up for that guaranteed tech debt of having to then switch over either to, you know, the mythical weather kit that might come out. That Apple probably will build, or, you know, maybe it's just not available at all anymore. Regardless, I'd have to make changes, and so I decided not to do that. Something that I did discover with learning about weather APIs is that they have very different designs and very different like algorithms for how they decide things. So as an example of maybe this not being, if we're talking about Dark Sky in particular, right? Maybe this not being as scary as as you might think, is that Dark Sky is really good about, is it about to rain where I live, right? They have really good models, and they do a really good job of tracking that part. General forecasting, I found them to be not nearly as good. And then, like, for example, AccuWeather, better at general forecasting, pretty terrible at telling you whether or not it's going to rain in the next 10 minutes. So they have these different companies and different APIs and different data sets have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so, for example, if a mythical weather kit were to exist that's based on this Dark Sky technology, depending on the kind of weather data that I wanted or needed in my app, that may or may not be a good fit for what I need to build. So while it is true that something like WeatherKit would be cool, and it certainly would empower developers to be able to use data that they might otherwise have to pay for. For example, you can do like geocoding lookup and stuff using the core location APIs. You don't actually have to call out to something and pay an external API to do that. And those things are producing network calls, right? So it is actually incurring real bandwidth costs, but Apple's just absorbing it. They're just letting you have it for free. So I would imagine, I'm just making this up, but I would imagine that a WeatherKit might be something kind of similar, where basically it's simple data, it's free, it's just built into iOS, and you can use it, you know, however you like. But it is limited in what it gives you, and so if you're building something that is more complex or whatever, you're going to have to seek out additional outside tools. So I do understand what you're saying, Fernando, and I do agree with you that it is that this sort of coalescing of power. I mean, Apple is almost at $2 trillion of market cap, makes them the largest company in the history of the world. They recently surpassed Saudi Aramco, I think is what it's called. It's the Saudi Arabian government's oil company in sort of size, and so that is scary, right? That is we're talking, an unprecedented amount. I mean, they could just spend hundreds of billions of dollars and like not even break a sweat, right? If they wanted to, they could just go out and just completely trounce someone if they wanted to. So it is scary. It is something to keep in mind. It is something to keep an eye on. But I do think that while their tools are great, and I feel like there could be a coalescing, right? Which a coalescing usually leads to inaction and a lack of innovation and sort of a laziness on the part of the provider. Look at TestFlight, for example, right? Like TestFlight was amazing. Apple bought it. It was amazing, but limited because it was external. It became internal. It was great, and it has stayed like fine, right? It's pretty good.
Not great.
But it could be amazing, right? And it's not. And I think in part that's because Apple is like, well, now we own it, and it's our thing, and it's the thing that we want you to use, and it's kind of the only thing that works the way that it works. So we're just going to kind of, let it be what it is, and you just have to take it or leave it, right? So that is the downside. That's the danger of this is really complacency, I think, over anything else. And then leads to crappy tools, crappy products, crappy offerings.
I think it's even more dangerous than that, to be honest, because an anecdote about the Kool-Aid is because we inherently trust Apple, and they've been selling it pretty well, not just the privacy aspect, but you trust them, right? My livelihood literally depends on them, so I have to trust them. Right. So, but the point here is that there is no transparency as to certain decisions regarding the App Store, and so I have no guarantees that I push my weather app, even if I use the weather API, Apple sees that I am senses a threat, senses that I am a good competitor, tries to buy me out. I say no. And then they just cut access to the App Store because I violate one of the guidelines. Right? And there's no recourse for me other than going through them, and they are right. So that's why with the whole Hey email thing and with the whole Epic drama, it's Epic. I really, really like how they approach this problem, where they're moving towards the public opinion because there's really nothing else they can do. If Apple says your app is no-go, it is just a no-go. So that is the actual danger I'm worried about.
To ask you a follow-up question, and feel free, any of you, to jump in, but what do you think we should, as a globe, right? What should we do about that? Because, for example, not to become a political podcast, and we're not going to, but as it pertains to technology, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has signed an executive order that is going to limit or outright ban U.S. involvement with Chinese managed and owned companies. So, for example, Tencent, which owns Epic, among other things, and then also the company that I'm forgetting their name, but the company that ByteDance, that company that owns TikTok, are both Chinese-backed companies, and so they potentially will be off the App Store, at least in the United States. There's all kinds of issues here, and WeChat, an app that is ostensibly just an instant message client, but if you look into it, is actually like an entire ecosystem of modern commerce for the Chinese citizen, is potentially going to get banned in some at least limited capacity. And a bunch of companies have come to the administration and said, people like Disney, Apple, and have said, if you continue with this order and you actually ban WeChat, there was a poll that said 95% of Chinese citizens will drop the iPhone. They'll be like, nope, WeChat is way more important to us than the iPhone is. We're done. And then you've basically, through your attempt to, like, I don't know, have some kind of trade standoff, you end up ruining a bunch of American companies for, a whole bunch of reasons. So my point with saying all that basically is, like, I don't trust the government to get this right. So if
I agree,
it's not the government and it's not Apple, like, how do we solve it?
I think this is sort of similar to Microsoft in the 90s. I think saying monopoly is the wrong way. It's anti-competitive. The issue with Internet Explorer wasn't that it was everywhere. You get to be everywhere if you get to be everywhere. The issue was that they were anti-competitive. They had an unfair advantage. So I think I haven't really thought about this too much, but really having the App Store as an ISP, that would quote unquote solve a lot of the issues. Like, you don't get to be both the referee and the player in your own game. Yeah, yes, you built it, so you keep the 30%. That's insanely high, but whatever, you built it. But you don't get to play both parts. So if the government or Apple decides to do something like that, I could see a lot of the pressure being relieved, in the sense that, all right, you know what? All apps play the same way, and it'll be very, very quick. You'll see it very, very quickly. Like getting Chrome, the Chromium engine into iOS, that would be very, very interesting. So there's a lot of things that you could do if you treat the App Store as just dumb pipes. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just an idea, because it's a very complex subject for sure.
And one thing to add too is to really think about what Apple's motivations are. Apple's motivations aren't to steal ideas, which is not to say that's the same for other companies. Like, Apple just wants the iPhone to be the best thing it can be. The reason why there's no Chromium on iOS is because, let's face it, it would tank iPhone batteries, and then Apple's going to have to be the one to respond to that, not Google for shipping Chromium, because people are not going to understand how things work. The fact that we can allow third-party purchasing through the App Store, like, we might think, oh, that's a good thing, but look at Epic. They're juicing money off of children for the most part, and they're trying to make it seem like they're saving 20% when Epic makes more money off of that transaction. And it's no longer through the ecosystem that parents might have come to trust. So I see tremendous benefit in having systems like in-app purchase being mandated for everything on the App Store, because it's something that I know is not going to be baloney when I put money into it, and because at the very least someone at Apple looked at it. Like, there's that very least human element to it, that I don't have to go on a random website and be like, should I trust this random store on the internet, and then do a whole bunch of extra research on it? I don't have to do that mental processing, and I think that's what Apple is very protective of for the iPhone and for their ecosystem entirely. Now, it's not to say that they're doing everything right, because they're doing a pretty bad job at it. But like, I can't say I can't understand their point of view, which makes it even more difficult to say what the right thing to do is. Because if there is an alt store and there is ways to do third-party payment processing, like, that's just going to make things more of a mess. We're going to say, yay, there's more options, but is that always better?
So I disagree. In the one thing I disagree with about everything you said, because everything you said is correct. But the one thing I disagree is the fact that they are not mutually exclusive choices. Epic is passing on the savings to customers. Like, that is real. They, like, you used to pay $10 for an item, you pay $8 for it now. So it is a true savings. And yes, of course, that Safari is more efficient than Chromium. So that's why it's not allowed. But it's also competition, right? They are not allowing competition into their own turf. And the other thing is, yeah, of course, someone has checked at least that the subscription is there and that it has the legal notices, but you can still find apps where you get a $50 subscription per week, right? So there's all of these things that what you said is true, but there are other things that are also true, like the internet. If you're a brand new app and you go out to the App Store, having people find you is obscenely difficult, right? Unless you get, like, we all dream and we all want for an editorial, for like something that showcases your app in front of 1,000, like a billion devices, but you're not going to get that most of the time. So what's the difference between me sideloading an app like we've done with the Mac? And I know for a fact that a lot of developers have made a decent living and built bigger companies on the Mac just by sideloading.
For decades, they've done that.
Just having the App Store.
Not even recently, but
yeah,
for decades.
Yeah, for decades. So we can absolutely keep the App Store as it is. Like, that is trustworthy. I like it. I think it's true. I would never send my mom or dad to just go to this website unless I'd done the research, which takes time, just like you said. But we could have both. We've already proven that they work because the Mac is not Windows.
And on the side loading thing, like on the Mac, you can put a ton of garbage in by quote unquote side loading that can steal all sorts of information. So I don't buy the argument that, oh, just allowing side loading is a great thing, because then you go clean up your parents' computer and you realize all the side loading they've done in between. Now, Epic did have side loading on Android, but they still wanted to go into the Google Play Store because, like, per their argument, the side loading was not good enough.
Yeah.
It had scary dialogues like, you need to allow Chrome to download software. That was the dialogue that they claim is scary. Now imagine what it would be on iOS. Like, we see the scary dialogues that Apple
Yes.
has on the Mac. It's like, this software will damage your computer if it's not notarized. So those are like actual scary dialogues, and they actively prevent you from doing it if you don't know the secret shortcut of right-clicking, you know? So I don't think sideloading is necessarily going to make things better for developers. And that's what kind of makes this whole thing extra difficult.
I think it doesn't work, right? Like, if you look at Android has allowed sideloading, I think, forever, since they launched as a platform. And if you were to walk up to a random Android user anywhere in the world, how many of them do you think would understand what you're saying when you say you can install software outside of the Google Store? They're going to have for the most part, no idea what you're talking about. Obviously, there's going to be significant pockets of people who do, but kind of by and large, I think that the sideloading experiment on Android hasn't really been much of a success. Maybe that is in part due to the fact that on Android people seem to be less likely to want to spend money on software. I don't know, but I think we are as a developer community, we are doing two things. We are assuming a level of understanding and tech savviness from our customers that probably doesn't actually exist, and a level of like sophisticated taste on knowing what is good and what is bad and being able to discern that for themselves. And then two, we are also very much undervaluing the amount of benefit that we are getting from the App Store in the state that it is in now. The fact that it is effectively a monopoly, and that the only way to get apps on your phone is to go through the App Store. I think there is value there that we immediately discount as like, I don't want to pay 30%. It's only 3% to get credit cards processed. What's the other 27% for? You know, so I don't know that 30% is the right number, but I do think that as a community, we are both like in our own bubble as far as tech understanding, and we overestimate the amount of understanding other people have about it, and then we underestimate the value of what we're getting from the App Store. But I think I do agree generally, like, with the sentiment that Apple does a lot of crappy things with their store and with their kind of they kind of bully people for either on purpose or I think most of the time by accident. You know, we talked about this. I don't remember if it was actually on this real stream or if it was a practice stream, but we talked about a poor Mac developer who got their entire developer account shut down, and it was completely just a mistake. It was literally like just a mistake in the system that it accidentally got turned off. But the consequence from that is they turned it back on. He had to complain. They turned it back on. But then all the apps that were installed on people's Macs were then reporting whenever they would open them that the software is damaged and will damage your computer.
Yep.
And it has, I'm sure, caused like irrevocable reputation damage to that guy's apps among regular users, because they're gonna suddenly I'm using the app and it's telling me that it's damaging my computer. Like, that's that's a problem, and it's just a clerical error on Apple's part, right? So they, whether it's by accident or on purpose, they do, I think, need to definitely do better, if nothing else, on kind of how they treat that whole ecosystem, and be careful about what they do and how they do it, because it can literally ruin an entire company. Like, it can ruin a whole business, right? Like, overnight.
Agreed. In the end, really, we could talk about this forever. But to be honest, all of us are just passionate about this. We, like I said with the Kool-Aid, like, we not only do I owe my livelihood to Apple, we look up to it. Like, yes, I want to believe them on the privacy and on everything. So it's just like all of these comes out of a passion for them to do the right thing, because they have been telling us that they want to do the right thing. So I think we're all very grateful for what they've provided. It's just the voices that we want to raise are that, hey, please be the company that we want you to be. Don't be Google.
Yes.
Because, well,
very well said.
Don't be you, anyway.
Okay, this week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by an iMessage app for your iPhone that makes it easy to send your friends and family passwords, notes, documents, and other confidential information they just don't want sticking around longer than it needs to. Are your parents asking for your Apple ID password yet again to log into iTunes on their Apple TV? Send them a Mystico secure message. Mystico secure messages are encrypted using AES 256 before being sent, and only the recipient will receive the key to decrypt them securely through iMessage. The catch? Once they decrypt the message, they won't be able to see it again once it's closed, making sure that what you sent them can't be seen a second time. Mystico is available in both pay-per-use and as an auto-renewing subscription, so you only need to pay for what you use, depending on how you use it, and comes with 10 free messages so you can give it a try. We want to thank Mystico for sponsoring our show. Search for Mystico, that's Mystiko, on the iMessage App Store to give it a try.
So do we go back to that topic? Because that is an amazing feature that I would love for Apple to just steal. No, I'm kidding.
Please,
implement in iMessages.
Nice.
Okay, now that we've gone through our topics, it's time for Complete the Code, where we quiz our listeners on your knowledge of Swift, Apple, and all things development. Ben, can you take it away?
Sure. So for this segment this week, we've got a new prompt for you to check out, a new question. But before we get to that, we're going to take a look at last week's solution. So if you are watching the stream, or if you're going to watch the YouTube video later, if you look right on your screen, you'll see in the upper right corner, we've got last week's solution. The problem was a double nested for loop that had an if statement conditional inside of it. And we were trying to figure out how to get that if statement conditional to skip to the next row if that triggered and was true. So it was true that it was a continue, but you needed to add a label so that it would continue at a particular spot. So if you look at the solution, you can see in the for row in rows, that outer for loop, we've got the skip label there at the top. And then where it says continue skip, we're saying specifically, I want you to continue at that label. So it basically goes to the next row in the sequence. So that is the solution. As far as the winners, let me pull that up. I was supposed to have that pulled up just now, but I didn't get it. Let me do that real quick. As far as the winner and the shout out goes, let's see. Yeah, I definitely don't have it. Dimitri, do you have that pulled up to give a shout out to the winners?
Few people that wrote in. Chad was very enthusiastic and wrote in twice that it is simply a continue, but it is unfortunately a bit more than that and just alluded to. Nick was the next closest one, and they suggested to use a skip or a label, so that way you can go directly to the loop that you're interested in, but they suggested it with a break, which is also not quite there. But we did get the correct answer, and Frank wrote in with the solution that Ben placed on screen.
Awesome. So for this week's prompt, we've got, if you look on the screen, and if you listen to the audio version of this, the podcast, we'll have this as both the chapter art. So if your podcast player supports chapter art, you can look there, or it'll be in the show notes. So feel free to look there for the prompt, because it's a little bit hard to do when all you can do is hear it. So for this week's prompt, we're going to take a look at this person struct. Given a struct named person with two properties, name of type string and age of type double, we have the following code. So after that struct, we've got some code that says let person equal a function called askForPerson that produces a person object. And after that, we've got an nslog statement that takes the person and prints out the name, and then prints out that person's age. And in that code, we've got string interpolation and a little bit of string formatting to get both the name and the age printed. So among all of that code, there is a mistake in here. And the prompt for you, the question for you is, where's the mistake, and specifically, what is it? So we will go over that next week. Look for that next week in next week's episode, and then we'll have a brand new prompt for you.
Be sure to tweet your answers with #CompleteTheCode, so that way you can get a shout out with your name. And if you have quizzes, please feed them to us, so that way we can have something that is not our full-time job that we're just slowly asking you. Can you find our bug? Here is 100 lines. I'm not too sure where to start.
Yeah, this will just become our own personal Stack Overflow. So please send in your prompts.
Okay, so with all of that out of the way, it's time for Compiler Error, a segment where I get to test my fellow completionists' knowledge about Swift Apple and all things development. So let me recap the rules. I'll read out some statements, most of which are factual or valid code completions, if you will, while only one of them is an outright made-up lie, aka the compiler error. The best part, it's up to each of you to use your master debugging techniques to determine which one is the compiler error. So let me go ahead and share my screen so that way you can all see the prompts. So we do have a theme.
Okay.
We do have a theme this week, and that is obscure Apple products. So I'm going to read each of the prompts, and then I'll call on one of you to start deliberating as to which one is the compiler error. So number one, a key player in pioneering the digital publishing space, Apple made several printer models in the 80s and 90s, such as the popular ImageWriter and LaserWriter. But they also made the Apple 410 Color Plotter, a printer that used a stylus along with a selection of inks to literally draw shapes and text on the page. Statement number two. Available for sale for just a couple of years, iPod socks were a series of pouches for iPods woven like socks and came as a package with 6 colors: gray, orange, pink, blue, green, and purple. For a limited time, they were also available in human sizes at the Apple Company store in Cupertino. Statement number 3. Known now as a feature that allows videos to be quickly taken by pressing and holding the shutter button on modern iPhones, the Apple QuickTake was a line of video cameras that could be used tethered to a Mac or on the go thanks to AA batteries. Statement number 4. Released in 2006, the iPod radio remote was an attachment for then new iPods that was shaped like a then unreleased clip-style iPod shuffle that allowed compatible iPod users to use their iPods as an FM radio tuner. Go ahead and start with you, Ben, since you know how this works already.
All right, so I'm taking a look at the prompts because there's a lot of text there. And again, if you're listening to the podcast, we'll have it as chapter art and also in the show notes, so check it out there. So the first one, key player in this publishing space. I do know that they definitely made printers, and I believe they even had laser printers. I can believe that the color plotter was the thing that they built because it sounds very like niche and kind of right up Apple's alley for something that is maybe not super widely applicable to, you know, the masses, but is still something that probably somebody at Apple wanted to build and just got permission to do so. So I can believe that that would be the case. I don't think they did, though. The iPod socks I know were a thing, and I can also totally believe that they made special socks that they only sold at the Apple Company store because that's exactly the kind of thing they do. I do know that QuickTake was a popular camera. Don't know if it did video though. Sometimes Dimitri puts in little tiny things that make it wrong.
I was gonna say,
because I'm pretty sure that was only a photo. It was a digital photo camera. I don't think that it took video. And then the iPod radio remote. I'm almost positive that they did release such a product. Whether it looked exactly like the clip style iPod Shuffle, I'm not sure. But so now I'm kind of torn. I feel like the color plotter or the QuickTake could be the wrong one. I'm just going to go with my gut, though, and say number one, that they did not actually make a color plotter. And so number one is my lie.
Awesome. So let's go with Fernando next.
when was the Newton released?
Can we help, or is this like a one person?
Oh, wait, yeah. What's
your
the
turn is
deal?
over.
All right.
You're on your own.
It's all you, Fernando.
What, I'm on
Yep,
my
it's all you.
own? Well,
Yep.
what if I just very slowly type into Google, or is that cheating?
That would definitely be cheating.
Oh, okay. I won't do it. I was gonna do it because before you explain the rules. Anyway, I honestly, I'm basically in the same boat as Ben. Uh, Number one, like I can't believe that they. I don't know. It just feels like the drawing on. I don't. It's stupid enough for Apple in the 90s, before the Renaissance. Like they just were throwing things at a wall so they could stick. Uh, these all have like little tiny things, like the writing. I don't believe I put socks. I know were a thing, but the available in human sizes. I'm like, it could be like just like Ben said, the quick take, but video camera with AA batteries. I don't know. And 4, I know 4 is probably a fact. Just so that we make things fun, I'm gonna say number. No, let's not make them fun. Number 1. Yeah, it's number 1. It's the literally drawing shapes that I. No, okay. Before you go, number 3. Number 3.
Your final answer.
Final answer. Yes, final
Number
answer.
3, the quick take.
Yes.
Okay, Johnny.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure number 2. I mean, I've heard John Siracusa talk a ton about how much he loves those socks that Apple does for his devices. So and it doesn't surprise me that they have them in the Apple Store. So 2 is the only one that like I'm pretty positive. Number 1 seems kind of like Fernando says, it seems pretty dumb, but seems like something that Apple would have done in the 80s and 90s, because they were always doing like doing that and being like, look how cool we are. We've got this thing that will draw your shapes and text and blah blah blah. So I can picture number 1. I don't know enough about QuickTake. I feel like I don't remember an iPod radio remote though. Sort of the years that I was like getting into like buying my first iPod, and I went from the iPod Mini to the iPod Nano. And I don't remember there being an iPod radio remote. I could be completely wrong. I mean, I was in high school. Who knows how, like, I wasn't reading the news or seeing everything that Apple does. So I'm going to go with number 4.
Okay. So let's go ahead and start with number 4, since that's the last one on this list. So released in 2006, the iPod radio remote was an attachment for the then new iPods. And what it was a cable that you can plug into your iPod. It would loop around. You can then plug your headphones, and it would look like those clip-on iPod shuffles. And none of that is a lie, because that is a code completion, and that is completely true. That it came out. Now, the clip-on iPod Shuffle came out later that year, so you must be wondering, like, Apple probably had both in the pipeline, and they're like, well, why don't we make this little thing into an iPod? And that's what they eventually did, I guess. So continuing. Exactly. Apple's very good at Sherlocking themselves.
They are, yeah.
So let's go and continue to number 3. So known now as a feature that allows you to take videos quickly, the Apple QuickTake was a line of video cameras that could either be tethered to a Mac or use on the go thanks to AA batteries. So although they are referred to as video cameras, they do only take still photography, but that is completely true because they are called video cameras. I just never said anything about them taking video.
I agree. I went with the misdirection from Ben.
Continuing that, we have number 2, available for sale for just a couple of years. iPod socks were a series of pouches that for iPods woven like socks. And Johnny, you were actually right on the nose with this because there was no such thing as human-sized iPod socks sold at the Apple company store. And not only that, they weren't just sold for a couple years, they were sold for nearly a decade by Apple. So the iPod socks were available, let me see, up to 2009. So They were available
Damn.
for quite a long time. So that just leaves number 1. So a key player in pioneering digital publishing space, Apple made several printer models, including the Apple 410 Color Plotter, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a pen that moves around CNC style, and it has several different inks. And let me go ahead and share a link with all of you because it's pretty cool looking, in all honesty.
It's just silly enough that they would actually make it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Look at that. Huh.
Wow.
All right. Wow, 83 to 88. They sold that for a good long while.
Nice.
And it was $1,200 in period money.
Yeah, so a lot
That's
of money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Apple made a lot of whimsical products leading up to Steve Jobs' return when he essentially canned most of them, I believe.
Yeah.
Including the printer line, including the Newton, and most of the computers who got simplified down to the iMac as soon as the iMac came out, and the Power Mac.
There was the famous 4-point grid that he made where he had consumer and pro, and he had 2 models apiece, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Four products, and that's it. That's all we're doing.
Yeah, mobile and desktop.
Right.
Consumer and pro.
Right.
So with that said, I want to personally thank everyone for watching live and listening in this week. We apologize for the audio issues last week, and we hope that the increased quality from this week makes it through. Fingers crossed, because we never know until we start listening afterwards, of course. As always, we'll be streaming every Friday, so be sure to follow us on Twitter at CodeCompletion to know when new episodes go live and get released. Be sure to also sign up for a monthly newsletter on our website at codecompletion.io, where we will recap the topics we discussed, reveal answers to complete the code, and share even more things we learned between episodes. And most importantly, as a new podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. As you've heard so far, we talk about a variety of things, so we hope to keep that variety going so that way you can dip your toes into the more complex things, but also learn about the broader topics as well. So it's your support that enables us to continue doing this, so please share with anyone who can, and we hope to grow a healthy community around these topics. So once again, I want to give my thanks to Fernando, who is at From Junior to Senior. That's FROMJRTOSR on Twitter. Johnny, who is at Johnny D. Hicks. That's JOHNNYDHICKS. And Ben, who is at Ferris Guy. That's FERROUSGUY, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri, and you can find me at Dimitri Buniol. That's DIMITRIBOUNIOL. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, guys. Thank you.